I grabbed the handle and flung open the door just as Dave staggered to his feet. He was still pale as hell and didn't look any better than when I left him lying in his bed. He stumbled to the side, bumping into his nightstand, and wrenched his head in my direction. "My God, Dave! Are you okay?" was all I managed to get out before he started toward me. His arms were outstretched and his hands opened as if to grab onto me for support. His eyes were still glazed and riddled with those odd purplish veins. I wasn't sure if he truly saw me or was just coming toward my voice. His guttural moans started getting louder as he crashed into me, sending me back into our small hallway. My back hit the bathroom door, and I heard a crack as the wood splintered and a pain shot up my spine. His right hand was locked on my shoulder, with his left hand swinging around, violently attempting to get a hold of me. The grip he held was tremendous. I knew he was a strong SOB, but not like this. I could feel the skin on my shoulders start to give way under his hold, and it felt like my muscles were being torn apart. I had my left forearm under his neck, which probably ended up saving my life. His teeth were chomping as his face got closer and closer to mine, like I was his breakfast. His breath smelled like rotten fish, and I could see his teeth were coated in blackish, thick blood. It clicked in my brain that this wasn't normal, and I was in danger. I didn't know what kind of danger, but it was enough to force me into action. As strong as he was surprisingly uncoordinated. Normally, Dave could whip my ass up and down the street. I guessed at the time that his being sick had made him a lumbering klutz. I used his weight against him. He easily had 30 pounds on my skinny ass. Twisting, I had tripped him up, sending him crashing face first into a small table in the hallway. A vase that had been his late grandmother's shattered on impact. The whole time I was screaming. "Dave, what the hell? What are you doing? Have you gone mad?" His only response was a snarling guttural moan. Unfortunately, the impact positioned him between me and the only exit. My door, which was right next to his, was still closed. Dave never quit moving toward me, even as he slammed into the floor. He was immediately reaching up at me again before he got up. I had no desire to get into another wrestling match with him, and I definitely wanted to avoid his death grip. I jumped into his room, barely missing his hand grasping at my pant leg, and shut his door. Within seconds, he was slowly but methodically pounding on it. At the time, I was surprised he wasn't trying the doorknob. Even so, I quickly locked it. It's funny how things like doors didn't mean much until after the awakening. This is where I learned one of my first big lessons. Years before dear old Grandma kicked the bucket, her dog chewed a big hole in the door, and Dave replaced it when he moved in. Doors in the 60s were much sturdier than the crap they made in our time. In my room, he may have never even cracked the wood, though I'm sure the door hinges would have given away eventually. But I wasn't in my room. I was behind a flimsy piece of shit. It was probably the third or fourth hit when the middle of the door splintered. The gap was only an inch or two wide, but it was enough for him to put his hand through. It only took a few seconds for him to rip a foot-wide opening and stick his head through the hole. His face must have taken some punishment when it hit the table and vase in the hallway. A flap of skin on his left cheekbone was dripping with dark red blood. His hands were also paying a price as they ripped at the razor-sharp edges of the cheap wood, shredding the skin on his fingers. I unconsciously backed up and fell onto Dave's bed. My right hand was definitely in a spot that he had pissed in, and I'm sure I was sitting in his throw-up. Of course, my brain refused to process any of that. I was more worried about my best friend trying to chomp on my face. "Pick it up," a voice said in my head. "Pick what up?" I mentally shouted back. Dave's relentless assault on the door didn't waver. He kept pulling on the wood, making the gap bigger. That was when time started to slow down. The door seemed about to give way to his attack, bending in the middle, and before I knew what I was doing, Dave's Glock was in my hand. I must have taken it off his nightstand. I screamed for him to stop, but he just kept coming. I knew it was only seconds before the door wouldn't hold him back any longer. I had to do something. By this time, tears were streaming down my face, out of fear, and because I didn't want to hurt Dave. My throat was hoarse from screaming. I knew what I was going to do, and I already hated myself for it. "Shoot!" the voice screamed. I pulled the trigger and my head exploded from the concussion. Firing a gun indoors without ear protection was never a good idea. I wasn't aiming for his chest or head, just his arm. I only wanted to hurt him so he would stop. I hit him in the bicep.